Well, today I want to talk about gluten intolerance versus genetic transmission of things. And, of course, gluten intolerance, people say, well, why is this new thing? Why is it such a problem now? Well, you go back into the writings of the Egyptian physicians 5,000 years ago, they were describing skin problems like eczema, dermatitis, psoriasis, and rosacea. They were describing asthma and bronchitis. They were describing bowel problems like diverticulitis and celiac disease. They were describing irritable bowel syndrome, inflammatory bowel disease, and so on. They just didn't know 5,000 years ago it was related to gluten. And these were kind of new things because prior to the introduction of wheat, barley, rye, and oats, the new grains, millet was the grain of the day in the region and doesn't have any problems like this. Well, what happens when you have a gluten intolerance? I want to direct you to the book Epigenetics, The Death of the Genetic Theory of Disease Transmission. I also want you to get a hold of the CD called Serial Killers. It really goes through this in some great detail, and it really should, everybody, whether you have a gluten intolerance or not, should listen to this CD several times. Again, it's Serial Killers is the name of the CD, because so many people have the problem. I mean, you can just look at people and say, oh, my gosh, or feel the back of an arm of a kid who's got all this rough skin, keratosis on the back of their arm like sandpaper, and doctors call it ichthyosis and say it's a genetic disease because the kids are born with it. It's just simply a gluten intolerance. And so basically what you have to do is really understand gluten intolerance. What does gluten do to you? Well, again, it's in great detail in the book Epigenetics and the CD Serial Killers, but let's go over it real quickly. What happens is you get a contact enteritis. Enteritis is the word used to describe inflammation of the lining of the intestine, the small intestine primarily. And it's kind of like when you get exposed to poison ivy on your skin, you get a contact dermatitis. Nobody's allergic to poison ivy. You don't eat it. For salads, there's no pollen associated with it because it grows under the ground with the roots. And so it's one of those things, nobody's allergic to poison ivy, but everybody can get a contact dermatitis. Well, the same thing is true with a gluten intolerance. The proteins in grains, glutens, and the glutens in oatmeal or oats is called gliadin. So a lot of people say, oh, we have a gluten-free oatmeal. There is no such thing. Okay, just that the gluten in oatmeal is called gliadin, so they're playing word games with you. If you're gluten intolerant, do not eat oatmeal or oats in any way, shape, or form because they have gliadin in there, a.k.a. gluten. Well, what happens is you get a contact enteritis, and these little villi, these little finger-like projections that run 360 degrees around your intestine, the lining of the intestine, instead of your intestine being a smooth like a garden hose, these villi rhythmically wave, and they work along with the muscular contraction of the intestines to help move food along, but also they increase the absorptive surface by 85%. What happens is you begin to get a contact enteritis. These villi, these finger-like villi in your intestines do not like gluten and gliadin, and so they begin to retract, and they get inflamed and start leaking. And some doctors will call it leaky gut syndrome. It can also be called irritable bowel syndrome, inflammatory bowel disease, diverticulitis, irritable bowel syndrome, Crohn's disease, colitis, ulcerative colitis, diverticulitis, even appendicitis. You get pain down in your right groins, they're going to take your appendix out. You get pain in your upper right side, they take your gallbladder out, and it's all gluten intolerance. Okay? Now, the nice thing about this is you get on a gluten-free diet, and for kids that are under 10 years old, within a week or two, I mean, you're going to see some dramatic results in improvement of their problems. And also, within a month or two, they've regrown their villi. Now, somebody who's 50, 60, 70 years old, and they've been eating gluten 6 times a day, purposely going out of their way to eat the whole grains and mixed grain sandwiches and breads and whole grain pie crusts and cakes and so on, these people will see dramatic results within 4 to 6 weeks on a gluten-free diet. And it might take them 6 months to a year to rebuild the villi in their intestines, but they will rebuild. Well, secondarily to all this, you get nutritional deficiencies. So let's say you live in a place around the Great Lakes where there's very little iodine in the soil, and you have a gluten intolerance. You're eating from the local markets, as everybody says to do, and there's very little or no iodine in the food. You're not supplementing, and so you're going to get a hypothyroidism. You're going to get a low thyroid. Okay? Let's say you live in Jackson, Mississippi. Okay, very little selenium in the soil, and everybody fries everything, and so you're going to be if you have a gluten intolerance, whatever little selenium there is in the soil, let's say you have 2% of what you need, and you lose 85% of your absorptive efficiency, what's 15% of 2%? Not very much, all right? And so you're going to wind up with a high rate of cancer. In fact, Jackson, Mississippi is ground zero, has the highest rate of cancer in America, has the highest rate of obesity, highest rate of diabetes, highest rate of many problems, and so high blood pressure, heart disease. Okay, so there's more doctors per person in Jackson, Mississippi than any other city in the United States. Why is that? Well, vultures tend to congregate where the dead and the dying are, okay? And so since there's so many sick people there, that's where the doctors go, all right? Well, all you have to do is get on a gluten-free diet, take your 90 for Life program, all 90 essential nutrients, 16 minerals, 16 vitamins, 12 essential amino acids, 3 essential fatty acids, and it all goes away. How good is that? Well, contact your Youngevity associate today. Ask for the book Epigenetics, The Death of Genetic Disease Transmission, and the CD, Serial Killers, and you'll be an expert in about a week on gluten intolerance. We'll be back with Dead Doctors Don't Lie for these messages. Okay, Doug, what pearls of wisdom do you have for us?
Well, I thought I'd talk a little bit about acid reflux today, as I've got a Fox News story here headlined Natural Remedies for Acid Reflux. And I thought, they're going to mention enzymes or possibly, eating some pineapple or something. And they say 1 in 10 Americans experience symptoms of heartburn at least once a week. They say chronic heartburn left untreated can lead to a more serious condition like gastroesophageal reflux disease or GERD. They say to prevent acid reflux, you can avoid triggers like smoking, certain supplements or medications, alcohol, fatty foods, citrus fruits, stress, and being overweight. They say there are over-the-counter prescription medications that can ease the symptoms of acid reflux. However, some people prefer a more natural approach, and they have some natural remedies. They say chew sugar-free gum 30 minutes after eating, which can help wash away acid. Licorice, they say licorice has a stomach healing properties and can get to the root of the problem rather than just calming the symptoms. Baking soda, mixing a half teaspoon in a glass of water can neutralize stomach acid. I found that one kind of funny.
Yeah.
And they say shouldn't be used for chronic heartburn because it's high in salt. Slippery elm, a couple of tablespoons of this herb in a glass of water can help coat and protect the stomach. Aloe can reduce inflammation. Drinking aloe juice can, but you can do that to ease the symptoms, but they say to caution on that, how much you do, because it can actually act as a laxative. And melatonin, taking the supplement, can help protect the digestive tract. They say these home remedies are not approved by the FDA, so you should consult your doctor. Not one mention of actually ramping up your stomach acid. Instead, they want to have you take baking soda and neutralize it, so you're going to have even more problems.
You're exactly right, Doug. Very astute as usual. But basically, there is no such thing as acid reflux. It really should be called lack of acid reflux, as you point out. When you don't have enough stomach acid, instead of the pH, the most acid pH is 1, most alkaline is 14, 7 is neutral. You really want to have your stomach environment at like 1.2, 1.5, about as acid as it can get. The key is it does many things. It helps you absorb B12 because it activates the intrinsic factor required to absorb B12. It helps you digest proteins down to amino acids, reduces the risk of food allergies because the pepsin produced by the stomach requires an acid environment. You can't absorb minerals without stomach acid. And what happens is when your stomach is not sterile, because let's say your pH is 4 or 5, you've been drinking carbonated drinks, you're drinking alkaline water with meals, you're not salting your food, which is the raw material to make stomach acid, the pH sort of begins to go up. Well, yeast and bacteria begin to grow in your stomach, and then every time you eat carbohydrates or sugars, they begin to ferment. You're like a beer vat, warm and wet, and all those bugs in there, and they produce this gas causing reflux. Not acid reflux, but a lack of acid reflux. I like our Ultimate Enzymes. It has stomach acid in it to reacidify your stomach, salt your food to taste. Remember, in just June of 2012, it's very, very clear that even the CDC, April of 2014, the CDC